Welcome to the strategic review by Schonert, Section 3, Team 4. You can see the names of the team members on your screen. My name is Randy Lemke, and I am presenting today. The company we selected was Nintendo. We picked this company because of the uniqueness of its product cycle for what we consider to be its core products, which are consoles and games. This is a company that really survives based on console launches, and where it's at right now is that the existing console is being retired and there is a new console launch coming up in 2025. So we thought that would be really interesting for us to examine. Interesting factoid, they were founded in 1889 and started out as a card game or player card game or trading card game company, and they evolved to now video games and what we think of them. So that's kind of a cool evolution, I thought. So I mentioned the switch to this new generation of console. That's really something that is being considered through pretty much every slide in this presentation. And when I look at the pestle, the thing that really stands out to us is this tariff issue, which has come to be discussed a lot in American political life. The US is the largest market for Nintendo. And so anything that would impact Nintendo's sales here in the US is going to be of great concern and interest. And the other thing to know is that the Switch 2, when you compare them against their competitors, they are the lower price option against the Sony PlayStation and Microsoft Xbox. So you don't want to see tariffs raise that Switch 2 price, although you can make the case that Sony and Microsoft are in the similar boat. So what impacts Nintendo will impact their competition in this way. But that would certainly be the first thing that we would want to look at when we consider the pestle and what the likely impacts are going to be. In considering the industry environment, it's really a tale of two cities. Nintendo are involved in the hardware segment as well as the software development segment, and they're vertically integrated. So they develop games to be played specifically on their hardware. But let's separate those out for a second. So when you look at the hardware, it is intense rivalry between Sony and Microsoft. They duke it out. They're somewhat protected because there's such a high barrier to entry in the console segment. You really need your own ecosystem. You need to be able to attract third-party developers to be able to put their games on your platform. So although there's intense rivalry, it's this rivalry between these few competitors, and they're such high barriers to entry into that. They're kind of like this trio that sort of is in a dogfight, but protected from outside entrance. When you look at the software side, it's much more open. And although you do have really big players on software, if you think about it, you can have a single person develop a software game in their own home and be successful in doing that. So there's much lower barrier to entries on that side, and it's much more just diverse a competition that they have. And this is how Nintendo operates. As mentioned about this combination of hardware and software, it's 94% of their revenue is in those pieces of business. Production's coming out of Asia, as I mentioned, and that strategy of broad differentiation is really their competitive advantage. It's unique game experiences you can't get anywhere else, combined with exclusive games that typically are legacy brands. They're very loved. Think Super Mario, Legend of Zelda, Metroid. There's a lot of awareness and nostalgia associated with that brand. This has been very successful as they've married those two bits together in their strategy, and so they've got great margins. They have that's basically their competitive advantage, is this vertical integration and proprietary technology and experiences. So as they compete against their core competition, and this primarily is on the hardware side, a although it does affect software, they really don't compete based on technical specifications. They compete based on the unique experience with proprietary games. So Sony has the higher powered console system. They dominate in home console, and with number 2 being Microsoft in the home console market. Nintendo, they dominate on that hybrid handheld experience where you're very close to the game, but it's not necessarily as spec heavy or as high technologically powered as the competition. That's been very successful, as I mentioned. So the sales of the Switch, they've sold 150 million units. They're out there in the market, but the sales have begun to decline. So they're in a downward trajectory. And part of that trajectory is influenced by this trend of cloud gaming, where you would essentially play your game connected to the cloud or on the cloud, which is more technologically demanding. Needs higher frame rates, less lag, things like that. And also the third-party support for other software developers is just not as strong for Nintendo. That's in part because of this lack of technology that they have. So a third party might have to, quote unquote, dumb their game down to be able to fit onto a Switch and not be as robust technologically, not look as good, which is not really that appealing to a third party. And just the hardware limitations really limit what you can do with third party. That leads to the 3 problems that we have identified. So problem number 1, the Switch obsolescence and the Switch 2 launch. I would say the Switch 2 launch is an absolute must win. They cannot succeed as a company and continue to compete unless that is a great console that draws people in and is an opportunity to expand its base of Nintendo customers. Nintendo have had past failures. So the Wii U, there's been some other ones that have not gone very well, and they've sunk a lot of money and lost a lot of money in those failures, and it really does set you up for a bad cycle. So this is a must-win for them. Other threats are intellectual property and piracy. So as people encounter the limitations of the Nintendo hardware, Nintendo are experiencing more counterfeiting, people trying to get the software outside of the Nintendo hardware ecosystem. And so there's piracy, there's copying, there's online emulators allowing you to play the Nintendo games online, trying to circumvent the hardware. I know that's not what Nintendo would want for their business, and it's not how they intend their games to be played, but for the pirating community, that is the very point, is to get it out of the hardware, which that community would not see the hardware as a draw. And then third problem identification is the weak online gaming network. So that trend that I mentioned of online games, again, this lack of hardware support showing its weakness. There's also just some business models that could be updated, subscription-based and in-game purchases. Nintendo does some of that. They don't do enough, and they're lagging behind in this area, and they could update that. Our potential solution for the launch is just a hardcore marketing campaign, which is going to be multifaceted, using both traditional and new media. It is going to be heavy rotation, so we want a very highly aware public, not just people who focus on games, but just the general public to be aware of the Switch, its release date, and titles, which I'll talk about in a minute. It'll include promotional events and influencer marketing, so unveilings, online events, live streamings, things like that, early access, demo events, just to continue to increase the awareness. All of this would be coordinated with launch titles that are the top of the top as far as the Nintendo titles. This is the Mario, this is the Zelda, This is a Mario Kart. It's the reason people would buy a Switch 2. They don't buy it just to have a new piece of hardware. They buy it for the hardware and the games that already exist on it. So you have to have those games at the time of launch for maximum synergy. So that's potential solution one. Solution two is just to do what some might see as the obvious thing and improve your hardware a little bit, Nintendo. Boost that RAM. It works for laptops, it works for consoles. So you can just boost that from 4 gig to 16 gig. That's going to give you the more complicated games. It will increase third-party support who no longer see the Nintendo console as a limiter and become more attractive. And this can all be done while keeping NVIDIA, which is the main supplier of chips, to the preferred supplier. Just use the upgraded chips. Use the new gen chips that are faster and more robust. That will also make the game console a little bit more attractive to the hardcore gamer, not just the nostalgia or family gamer. And potential solution three is to support the retired console. That'll increase revenue streams. It'll help to smooth out the dips as the old console sales fall off and the new console hasn't quite caught up. You can continue to make games for one version from the old, one version for the new. The old console just being a stripped down version with maybe not quite as nice of graphics, but just continue. You have to remember, all of those 150 million Switch consoles are also stores that exist within a company, or within the customer base. So you can use those Switches to buy Nintendo software. People do. So you don't want to just shut that off and force people to buy from the Switch 2. And this could also help with the piracy. It's just another way to play Nintendo games that is, sanctioned as appropriate by Nintendo. Our recommendation is that we go after this launch. I mean, this is the can't miss issue. A launch will drive console sales, which drives software sales, and that drives the success of the company. This is the obvious thing to do from our perspective. So here's the strategy. Step one, you would develop the strategy to conduct your market surveys, figure out your messaging. How are you going to differentiate Nintendo from Sony and Microsoft? Some of that is already done and has resonated, but we really got to attack the hardware issue and figure out how we're going to differentiate in a way that would address some of that, or at least make it so that that is not such an important issue for people. And then you would select your marketing channels. TV, but which TV channels, which print, which stores are you going to partner with, so forth. So you just get very specific at this time and have your plan ready to go. Step two is pre-launch. You launch your teaser campaigns. Those marketing channels that you selected in step one, you'd start dripping in initially, but then with increasing frequency or marketing messaging, you'd work with your influencers. The demo events would get hosted so that everybody's got a high level of anticipation. And then you'd secure retail and e-commerce pre-order deals so that the old saying of you cannot sell from an empty cart, the cart in this case is an Amazon warehouse probably, or a Walmart warehouse. You want to make sure that those are all stocked up with Switch 2s and ready to go. And step three, you launch and you support. So this would be a global live stream event, engaging with influencers and celebrity spokespeople. You can offer early incentives, so people want to buy early games would get something, either maybe some figure or some enhanced version of the game. And then you want to make sure that the support community is ready to go to support the Switch upon launch, so that any technical issues that are had, you can deal with those as they crop up and not wait for it to become an issue in the community. In terms of resource and budget allocation, you want to make sure that your marketing and customer service teams are at the ready. Make sure that you got your influencers lined up, ready to go, and that they're on board. And then on the right is how we would do our budget allocation with the different percentages allocated for the various marketing activities. And that is our plan. We appreciate your attention. We had a great time doing this presentation. Thanks so much and hope you have a great day.